The film begins with a lovely girl named Chong Irene. Today is her birthday, and she's taking a taxi somewhere. The kind taxi driver expresses a wish to go back in time, even offering to trade his soul to make it happen. Just before Irene leaves the taxi, he tells her to make the most of her time because you can't redo the past, even if you want to. Hearing that, Irene is surprised but smiles in response to his words. After leaving the taxi, she meets her friend Yorum. The scene then shifts to a practice studio where 6 guys are getting ready for a birthday surprise. These 6 guys are about to debut as idols called Astro tomorrow. However, because it's their friend's birthday, they're taking time out of their busy schedule with their manager to prepare a special surprise. These 6 guys are Cha Eun-woo, MJ, Jin, Rocky, Moonbin, and Yoon Sung-ba. After they got everything ready for the surprise, MJ told everyone that Irene was getting close. So they quickly cleaned up and turned off the candles because they were worried about being caught. They even turned off the lights and hid because they thought it was their manager who was coming. But it turned out to be Irene in Yorum, not the manager. At that time, they felt pretty disappointed because they couldn't give Irene a surprise. Even though the surprise didn't work out, Irene thanked her friends, and they all wanted to have some cake together. But then, their manager showed up and caught them. And just when they got caught, there was heavy rain and lightning. Suddenly, something strange happened, and 3 of the guys disappeared and went back in time. Those 3 were Cha Eun-woo, Jin, and MJ. They woke up in a school hall that looked exactly like 1 year ago. They were really confused about why they were there, especially because they were wearing school uniforms. At that moment, they didn't realize that they had traveled back in time. When they were feeling confused, suddenly a teacher came and scolded them in the school hall. So they hurriedly left the hall. Outside the school, Eun-woo mentioned that he had seen a poster that said 2013. Eventually, he guessed that they had somehow gone back in time, even though it sounded crazy. But that's what actually happened. Not much later, Yorum arrived and scolded Eun-woo. Yorum didn't realize that Eun-woo was different from Moonbin. Of course, Eun-woo couldn't understand what Yorum meant because she came from the future. It turned out they had traveled to the past when Eun-woo and Moonbin had a disagreement. Here, they realized that the Yorum with them was not from the future, but from the present. Because they were in the past, Eun-woo suggested they start over so they could debut. Hearing that, MJ disagreed, saying they had already practiced in the future, and they just needed to perform well in the show and return for the audition. Jin, who loves watching movies, added that if they changed the present, it might change the future they came from. Eun-woo agreed and said they should follow the same path to ensure the future doesn't change. So they headed to the practice room. There, Yorum got upset with Eun-woo for not wanting to apologize to Moonbin. Eun-woo seemed unbothered because he believed he and Moonbin would make up soon. Yorum complained that they never take practice seriously and their relationship with Moonbin is falling apart. On top of that, they haven't finished their song yet. Then they ignored Yorum and picked up musical instruments. Yorum was surprised and impressed when she heard the amazing song they played. How could they create such a great song when they didn't have anything like it before? It turned out this song was from their future. After singing the song, they decided to use it for the audition. At first, Jin was unsure because he was worried about changing the future. There, Eun-woo assured him that passing the audition wouldn't alter the future. Eun-woo, who is also a music composer, started writing down the song notes on the computer. He worked late into the night on the project, with Irene by his side. Then heavy rain fell, lightning struck, and the lights went out. Eun-woo was a bit frustrated because he hadn't had a chance to save the file. Right now, their little group consists of only 4 members. They are Eun-woo, MJ, Jin, and Moonbin. However, in the future, there will be 6 of them, and MJ and Jin remember how Rocky and Sung-ba joined their group. Sung-ba is Jin's younger brother, and MJ and Jin want Rocky and Sung-ba to join the group according to the original plan, so that the future remains the same. In the practice room, MJ asked Eun-woo if he had finished copying the song notes on the computer, and also asked about songs for their debut and future albums. Out of nowhere, Eun-woo got really mad at MJ. Jin and MJ were surprised by this sudden change in Eun-woo's behavior. They soon realized that the Eun-woo from the future had disappeared, and the Eun-woo there was the real one. While they were eating together, MJ and Jin, who were curious, directly asked Eun-woo if something unusual happened to him last night, like being struck by lightning or something. Eun-woo got annoyed because they were asking strange questions like that. Soon after, Eun-woo and Yorum left, And then MJ started acting strangely, as if he had changed too. Then they went to watch Sunba perform somewhere, and after the performance, they invited Sunba to join their group. Sunba immediately accepted without hesitation. The process of Sunba joining the group happened just as it should have. The scene now takes us to Ireen's house, where she sees her brother, who is currently unemployed, sitting and watching football. There he invites Ireen to watch with him, but she declines because she already knows which team will win. It seems like Ireen might have some knowledge of the future. Next, Eunwoo and Moonbeam are fighting. They were practicing with the other two at school when a senior suddenly came and scolded them. The senior was upset because they were using the practice room without his permission. Turns out this senior also had a team performing at the festival. Since they kept getting scolded, especially since the practice room was shared, Moonbeam lost his temper and got into a fight with the senior. There was a bit of a fight during that time. Eunwoo was also annoyed with the senior, but he didn't want to cause trouble. So he scolded Moonbeam for not being patient. Moonbeam couldn't understand why Eunwoo wasn't supporting him, even though he was angry because he was defending their team. Because of this argument, Eunwoo ended up kicking Moonbeam out of the team. In the evening, Ireen met Moonbeam and asked him to make up with Eunwoo's so they could go back to training together. It turns out that Ireen is not only Moonbeam's best friend, but also his childhood friend, and he has feelings for her. Despite this, Moonbeam refused Ireen's request because he had become lazy with Eunwoo. The next day, MJ and Jin remembered what the next part of the story would be like. It turns out that today's plan was for Ireen to meet Eunwoo and persuade him. MJ and Jin were relieved because it meant that Eunwoo and Moonbeam would eventually make amends. They were worried because the current Eunwoo was the real one, who was highly respected. They were afraid that the future might change, and Eunwoo wouldn't apologize to Moonbeam. Unfortunately, Yeorum overheard Eunwoo's saying that he didn't want to apologize to Moonbeam and got really upset. Yeorum rushed to meet Eunwoo, who was supposed to talk to Ireen. Because of this, the storyline changed cause it was supposed to be just Ireen and Eunwoo talking today. But Yeorum's interference messed everything up. This means that now, no one can be certain about how the future will unfold. On the other hand, Moonbeam was facing some trouble from street bullies. But luckily, his friend Rocky comes to his rescue. It turns out that Moonbeam has been training on the streets ever since he left their group. Then, he met Rocky, who also goes to their high school, but he's a year younger. They practice together a lot and become really close, like brothers. One day, at Ireen's suggestion, MJ and Jin show up where Rocky hangs out with some big speakers and challenge Rocky to a rap battle. And it was an amazing rap battle. Moonbeam, who was watching, was thrilled. Jin then invites Rocky to join their group. But when Moonbeam hears this, he goes quiet. So Ireen invites Moonbeam to chat, and he happily talks about how cool Rocky is. Rocky is a bit of a quiet guy who avoids getting into trouble, and it's pretty funny to see how he holds back his emotions when there's a problem. Ireen then mentioned that Rocky's personality was just like Eunwoo's. At that time, Moonbeam was okay with Rocky but didn't want to talk about Eunwoo anymore when he heard that. His expression changed, and he left Ireen. Meanwhile, since Ireen guessed right, her brother asked her to predict the winner of the next football match because he wanted to bet on her prediction. But Ireen admitted that she was just guessing and didn't really know who would win. At school, MJ tried to talk to Jin about what happened, but something strange occurred. Jin seemed different and couldn't remember anything about the future. MJ thought it was a joke at first, but it turned out that the future Jin had disappeared, and the Jin from the present was there. Now, only MJ remained from the future. Meanwhile, Eunwoo was practicing the piano alone at school when a senior approached and teased him. The senior felt bad for Eunwoo, whose team had broken up. He also mentioned that only one student from their school would continue to the audition. So, Eunwoo's team had to win at the festival if they wanted to move on. Impressed by Eunwoo's talent, the senior asked him to join their team and practice together at school that night if he was interested. In the evening, MJ tried to explain what had happened to Jin. He told him that the three of them had come from the future, but Eunwoo, who had lost his memory, thought MJ was just joking. Not long after, Yeorum and Ireen showed up, wondering why Eunwoo hadn't arrived for their practice session, which was scheduled for that night. It turned out that Eunwoo had actually come to school and decided to join the senior students. Since MJ was now alone, he asked Ireen for help. He wanted her to talk to Moonbeam and try to persuade him, as Moonbeam was very close to Ireen. MJ knew he couldn't expect anything from Jean anymore. Sometimes MJ accidentally mentioned things from the future, which surprised Irene. On the other hand, Moonbeam and Rocky had a run-in with some street bullies. The bullies tried to pick a fight with them, and it escalated into a fistfight. Irene and MJ happened to witness this and rushed to help. There, MJ mustered up the courage but ended up apologizing instead. Meanwhile, Irene tried to call their friends for backup. Back at school, Eunwoo seemed distracted during practice. He didn't really want to join the senior students and felt guilty for betraying his friends, but he felt like he had no other choice because he wanted to become an idol. Then, Irene called him and told him that Moonbeam and the others were in danger, and he really wanted to help. However, his reputation was at stake, so he decided to ignore the call. During practice, the senior got really upset because Eunwoo was daydreaming. Eunwoo finally realized he made the wrong choice and insulted the senior's song, saying it sounded terrible. Then he decided to quit the team and rush to help his friends in the fight. Unfortunately, Eunwoo was too late to make a difference. At the police station, Yeorum was worried about Moonbeam's bruised face because she likes him and hopes to see him become an idol someday. Shortly after, Eunwoo arrived and offered to be their guardian so they could be released from the police station. He also apologized to Moonbeam and asked him to come back to the team. Moonbeam forgave him, and now they are back together. The Astro Boy group is now complete with all its members. At home, Reem couldn't stop thinking about what MJ had said. She was suspicious and thought that maybe MJ was also from the future. It turns out that Irene herself is also from the future. While pondering this, her brother came and asked her to predict which football club would win. Irene told him she didn't know, but when her brother promised to find a job if she guessed correctly, she gave him an answer, hoping he wouldn't become unemployed again. At school, Yeorum is thrilled that Moonbeam has come back. Then, MJ playfully teases Yeorum because in the future, she'll be his girlfriend. He doesn't mind that she currently has a crush on Moonbeam because in the future, she'll be dating Moonbeam. Soon after, Eunwoo starts playing the song they plan to use at the festival. But then, MJ points out that this isn't the right song they should be using. He accidentally reveals that Eunwoo wanted to use this song in the future. This makes Irene even more suspicious that MJ might really be from the future. So she invites MJ to chat. MJ then confesses everything to Irene. Finally, Irene admits that she's also from the future. Until now, she thought she was the only one who had traveled back in time. She mentions that Eunwoo changed after a thunderstorm one night, and Jean might change too when it rains and storms again. They both realize that the rain and lightning are responsible for sending them back in time. Irene has gone back and forth 3 times from the future to the past. The first time, she returned to when she first met Eunwoo and his friends, but she thought it was just a dream. The second time, she realized it wasn't a dream but didn't know what to do. Now, it's the 3rd time and Irene asks MJ for help. The following day, they all gather to get ready for their performance. Once again, MJ mentioned that the song they were planning to play wasn't the right one. Jean quickly teased him for always talking about the future. Then, they'd all sang together. Their beautiful voices attracted a crowd of students, including the senior students. Seeing Eunwoo and his friends reunite warmed their hearts. The senior trained hard because he was worried about competition. Sadly, the other members weren't taking practice seriously, which irritated the senior, leading him to kick them out. Shortly after, Irene and MJ went to the practice room, where Irene had asked for help so that MJ could return to the future. She wanted things in the present to go smoothly and not change the future. She also wanted to catch up to the future as soon as possible. When lightning struck, it turned out that Irene had been the one transported to the future. She woke up in front of the concert hall, an hour before Astro's debut. At that time, Yeorum invited her inside because the audience had already been let in. Since Irene and Yeorum were friends of Astro, MJ picked them up to go backstage. Backstage, Irene was overjoyed because Astro was finally making their debut. However, on their way backstage, she suddenly fainted. It turned out that she had gone back to the past. She woke up in the classroom, and because that future was so brief, she thought it was all just a dream. At that moment, Yeorum quickly brought Irene to the practice room because there was an issue with Eunwoo and his friends. On her way there, Irene bumped into MJ, who asked about what happened the day before. MJ seemed puzzled, and this made Irene think that MJ had successfully returned to the future, and what she had experienced earlier was just a dream. Unbeknownst to Irene, MJ actually chuckled behind her back because he was just pretending. He hadn't managed to return to the future, and what Irene saw was real, not a dream. Inside the practice room, Minwoo explained the problem. It turned out that their submitted song was accused of being copied from someone else's. Even though their teacher knew that their song was original and created from scratch, a senior had submitted the exact same song first and claimed it as his own. This meant that their song couldn't be considered for the festival. Yo-room was really upset, especially knowing how hard Eunwoo had worked on the song. With the performance approaching quickly, there was no way they could create a new song in time. MJ once again suggested that the song they had wasn't the right one. Naturally, the others teased him again about his future knowledge. On the other hand, Irene now understands that MJ hasn't managed to return to the future and is just messing around. MJ apologized to Irene and admitted that he was joking. He then mentioned that in the future, Eunwoo had wanted to use one of the songs from their album for the festival. This triggered Irene's memory of the moments right before Eunwoo returned. It turns out that night, Eunwoo was busy copying the musical notes onto the computer. Soon after, MJ and Irene went to the practice room and checked the file Eunwoo had worked on that day. Unfortunately, the file wasn't saved due to a power outage. But Irene looked into the computer's autosave feature and found that 80% of the song's progress was still there. Meanwhile, a senior came over to taunt Eunwoo. He bragged about turning his team into cute girls and expressed confidence in winning the festival. An annoyed Eunwoo asked him if he was proud of stealing other people's work. Surprisingly, the senior said he was very grateful. He then headed to the practice room to train his girls' team. Some students who overheard the conversation realized that Eunwoo and his friend's song had been stolen. They felt sorry for Eunwoo, despite his efforts and struggles. MJ and Irene then shared the song from the future with their friends. Eunwoo couldn't believe that such a great song was his creation, and he couldn't even remember making it. Irene decided to reveal the truth about them coming from the future, even though it was hard to believe. The evidence was right there in the form of this future song. MJ mentioned that they could also lose their memories of the future, just like what happened to Eunwoo and Jin. Yo-room felt a bit annoyed that no one had told him something so important earlier. MJ got a bit frustrated and said he had been saying it every day, but everyone thought he was joking. Then they all laughed about it. Soon after, Moonbeam asked if the story from the future about the seniors stealing their songs was true. Irene said it shouldn't be like that, cause the whole plot had changed. MJ admitted it was his fault, as he had said something that made Yo-room misunderstand. Because of this misunderstanding, Yo-room came to the practice room angry. In reality, all that was supposed to happen was the moment when Irene persuaded Eunwoo. But things went off track because of this new song created by Eunwoo in the future, a song that now gave Eunwoo hope that he could complete it. After that, Irene and Moonbeam walked together, and Moonbeam asked what the future held for them, whether they would date. Irene smiled and told him that their relationship would stay the same, just friends. This left Moonbeam slightly disappointed, as he had planned to confess his feelings when he turned 20. Irene added that in the future, Moonbeam wouldn't confess to her. Instead, someone else would confess to him, and it was Yo-room. This revelation left Moonbeam feeling confused. While buying food, Yo-room asked Irene how it felt to come from the future. Irene explained that at first, she was confused. In the future, she often wondered why things happened a certain way and regretted her decisions. But upon returning to the past, she realized that her choices weren't mistakes, cause they were all part of the plan. Returning to the past helped her understand why certain things had to happen. Yo-room then apologized for being Irene's friend when she found out that Moonbeam liked Irene. Irene promised to help Yo-room achieve her love and make sure that she wouldn't regret it. This revealed that what Irene had told Moonbeam earlier was actually her hope for the future, which to help Yo-room win Moonbeam's love. With MJ's help, Eunwoo worked on completing the song. MJ was a bit confused because he had forgotten the lyrics he had sung in the future. Irene hummed to jog MJ's memory, but it turned out that Eunwoo was the one who immediately came up with the lyrics. The lyrics were beautiful, and they successfully finished the song. They practiced together, filled with happiness. On the day of the festival, the group of senior girls performed first. Backstage, Eunwoo and his friends were a bit nervous, even though they were confident they would win with their performance. While they were getting ready, MJ suddenly felt something strange about himself. Eunwoo and his friends took the stage and delivered their best performance. Irene recorded their show and uploaded it to YouTube. As soon as the upload reached 100%, Irene fell asleep. It was raining, and there was lightning outside. One morning, Irene woke up from her sleep and realized she had returned to the future. It was the day when the boy group Astro was going to make their debut. At that time, Irene rushed off, and she happened to see her brother looking all tidy. It turned out that her brother had found a job, just as he had promised. Irene was delighted because her brother was no longer unemployed. On her way to the concert hall, Irene took the same taxi as she did at the beginning of the story. Backstage, MJ started acting strangely, and it turned out he had just returned from the past. He was quite confused by the situation and even wondered if everything that had happened so far was just a dream because his friends didn't remember going back in time. MJ then gathered Irene in Yo room to go backstage. He wanted to express his happiness that Astro was finally able to debut. Even though the past had changed a bit in the end, the Astro Boy group still managed to debut in the future. In the previous future, Yo room was dating MJ, but in the current situation, she was dating Moonbeam. This change was orchestrated by Irene, who wanted to bring Yo room and Moonbeam together. This news surprised MJ because he remembered Yo room being his girlfriend. MJ then mentioned that he had thought it was pointless to approach Yo room in the dream. But Irene reassured him, saying that nothing is pointless for those who prepare for the future. Hearing this, MJ realized that everything was real and not a dream. He had been sad about not dating Yo room, but now he was cheerful and happy because he had experienced something extraordinary. Irene added that dreams are often more beautiful than one can imagine. Finally, the boy group Astro made their debut, and the film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if you're ever in need of a time machine, just hang around in a thunderstorm, cause you might travel to the past or future. Just remember to pack an umbrella, because, safety first.